so welcome to my thesis recap. My thesis is called Being Appearing, a Cultural Analysis and Phenomenology of Fashion Model Embodiment, which is quite a mouthful. Uh, my thesis explores the bodies of fashion models through cultural analysis, phenomenology, and my personal experience as a model. Phenomenology is a branch of philosophy that explores how the body feels and is lived subjectively. So my ideas about embodiment and model bodies are often personal and drawn from my own body. I focus on female models rather than male models and confine my analysis to the upper echelons of high fashion rather than other modeling markets, because this is the realm I have experience with. My overarching focus is visibility's impact on the body and how being looked at alters the model body's relationship to herself and to the world. Existing scholarship on modeling has examined the industry from historical and sociological perspectives, focusing on how the profession evolved and analyzing its economic and social structure. My thesis turns to an embodied examination of modeling, asking how it feels to be a model body. In this presentation, I'll give a brief overview of the project, which has 3 chapters, and then spend most of my time focusing on my 3rd chapter, which is less densely theoretical and more autobiographical. To briefly outline my methods, the thesis reads theories of embodiments from several disciplines, including Black feminist theory and continental philosophy. In particular, it reads between Hortense Spiller's groundbreaking essay, Mama's Baby, Papa's Maybe, Maurice Merleau-Ponty's book, Phenomenology of Perception, and Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex. In interpreting these theories and putting them together, I aim to articulate my own understanding of embodiment in relation to the specific themes of visibility that interest me. I also analyze my personal archives from my years as a model, including my stack of journals that a friend had to ship to me when I was in New York over break. Okay. My first chapter sets up my theoretical framework and explores phenomenological questions of the body's status as an object or subject. I take as my starting point Hortense Spiller's distinction between flesh and body in the context of American slavery, where she defines flesh as the captive person and body as the liberated person. This distinction is important for understanding that a body can't be assumed to be something everyone has in the same way. And it allows me to read embodiment through the lens of a system of power that humanizes some bodies and dehumanizes others through the meaning it inscribes in them. For Spillers, gender is inextricably a project of racialization, where enslaved Black bodies are excluded from the dominant symbolics of gender. Instead, Spillers describes gender difference as a marker of elevated humanhood, writing that female gender is, quote, an outcome of a certain political sociocultural empowerment in the context of the United States. Taking this as a departure point helps me to later understand models as embodying an outcome of several cultural empowerments, not just that of gender difference, which the model highlights and dramatizes, but also of interiority and individuality, some of the affective qualities that the model imbues into the objects she sells. Crucially, the model is not just a pretty face. She also performs personality as part of her job. And when she's selling an outfit, her allure is not meant to make the consumer want her, it's meant to make the consumer want the outfit. This job of channeling desire and mediating the aliveness of things depends on her being a non-thing in important ways, or an avatar of the possessive individual. My second chapter conducts a close reading of an image from a Gucci perfume campaign featuring the celebrities A$AP Rocky, Julia Garner, and Elliot Page as models. I examined their representations through the lens of racialized sexuality, a term that describes the linking of racial attributes to sexual comportment. And ultimately, I explore the concept of parasexuality as a sexuality that is specific to models. What emerges from these theoretical foundations is the idea that my body is what makes me a subject for myself, but it's also what makes me an object for other people. This paradox can be summarized as the duality between being and appearing, and my third chapter takes up this disjuncture, asking how the model body takes shape there. Describing how the fashion model's body is lived and produced, I suggest that being looked at phenomenologically changes the body. When I'm aware of being observed, I'm not as absorbed in an action, I cannot apprehend sensory information as openly, and I'm not as embedded in the experience of my body. In other words, I am performing more than I am being. Photography heightens these effects as a heightening of vision. Modeling brings these effects even more fully into the body than normal visibility does, because modeling prolongs the duration of looking, increases the frequency of observation, heightens the intensity of the gazes, and proliferates the photos of oneself that one exists around. As a result, modeling exaggerates the duality between my body for me and my body for others. To set up some personal background, I became a model when I was 16 years old by sending photos to an agency at the encouragement of one of my mom's coworkers. I signed a contract with Ford Models in 2013 and worked for 5 years. I was fairly successful, flying around to walk in fashion weeks and appearing in several Vogue magazines, as well as in advertisements and catalogs. But I retired when I turned 21 because I was worn out by the requirements of the model body. When I use the term model body, I refer to an intentional embodiment that models use in their work and that extends beyond their work, because even when they are not on the job, models are always responsible for their image. The model body is a learned, disciplined, transposable set of gestures and emotional projections. It encompasses the model's runway walk and her repertoire of poses. At the same time, the model body is also a physical shape, a morphology that is both inherited and produced. It is a matter of both having a certain body and making a certain body. On the affective side, to develop her affective and gestural body, the model must gain an awareness of the different perspectives that can be taken on her. Through photographers' reactions to her poses, she develops a felt sense for her body's orientation toward a light source and a background. Her own features live prominently in her mind's eye as she envisions how each turn brings new aspects of her face and body into being for the camera. While posing, her awareness must extend into all parts of her body, down to her extremities, because the placement of even her fingers must complete the motion and emotion she intends for the image. She learns how to symbolize emotions with her whole body, how a certain narrowing of her eyes or parting of her lips can serve as shorthand for an entire affective genre. To quote Roland Barthes, she knows how to work upon her skin from within. And these pictures are taken from a bridal company's website, and to me, they seem clearly chosen for the affective genre that they communicate, which is like the feeling of the bridal company, of this like commercialized feeling evoked in the smile and the look over the shoulder and the step in the picture on the right. In terms of the model body's morphology, we have first and foremost her thinness. The thin ideal is a destructive norm with acute class, gender, and racial meanings. And scholars have pointed out the ways that anti-fatness is inextricably linked to anti-blackness and fat phobia to femphobia. It takes a lot of work to attain the thin ideal. I had an eating disorder, and other models I knew did too, though it was never spoken of even amongst ourselves. But the type of body that can fit the fashion industry's norm relies on a very unusual, totally reorganized relationship to bodily cues and bodily functions, and a different conception of the uses of the body. The French philosopher Gilles Deleuze has this concept of a body without organs, which is an abnormal body whose parts subvert their conventional functions or take on antisocial uses and relations. For Deleuze, an anorexic person is a body without organs for whom the necessity and the pleasure of eating feels less good or even bad. My journals from this time are filled with drawings of bodies and of food. Phenomenologists speak of a body schema, which is a mental model of one's own body accumulated through experience and interactions. They explain that the body schema rarely coincides with the physical contours of one's body as perceived by others, and it can support multiple contradictory possibilities at the same time. While I felt skinny, I also constantly felt not skinny enough. These feelings make the thin ideal a very conflicted, very tenuous reality, held together by painful self-control and always failing. The thin ideal is enforced in modeling through surveillance and discipline. Tools for this enforcement include the glance of agents and casting directors, whose expressive eyes I've felt size up my body in an instant and reflect it back to me with their critiques without having to say a word. Agents also take regular photos of models that are called digitals or Polaroids, which are supposed to give the agency unmediated, up-to-date visual information on the model's shape. Regular measurements of the model's bust, waist, and hips serve the same purpose, as do the use of certain standardized outfits at castings, where models may be asked to change into a size 0 bodysuit, for example. Using such a garment is a way to totally expose the body and make it speak on the terms of the person who's evaluating the model, in order to discover whether that particular model, because of their facial features and body shape, will be able to represent who we think of as beautiful and what we collectively define as a good life. Those who are put into this privileged position go through a lot of distortions to take on this rarefied role. Michel Foucault has shown that individuals internalize a surveilling gaze to the point that they exercise it on themselves, becoming their own surveyor. And the model ends by seeing herself constantly through the eyes of influential people in her industry, constantly appraising her own behavior, aware that everything she does in every aspect of her life will affect her appearance. Though there are many days when the model is not working, there are no days when she is not a model. Aside from these forms of inspection and surveillance, models experience so many other forms of visibility that I think of her as existing in an environment of her own representation. To see this environment concretely, we can turn to one of my journal entries from 2014 on the eve of my first New York Fashion Week. In it, I'm 16 years old. I describe a visit to my agency to meet agents from Ford Paris, and I'm buffeted by a flurry of visual representations of myself. I write, first, a French agent, Jerome, took digitals of me in the terrace room. Then another French guy, older, with a beard and piercings, whose name I don't remember, took pics of me with his fancy SLR camera against the window wall chair. Then took a video of me like 20 times over. He turned on these two big photography lamps and had me walk jauntily into the frame, seduce the camera with a glare, play with my hair, bat my eyes, and swish off in the other direction. When this was all wrapped up, Nancy showed me my new portfolio on Ford.com. They got rid of my old, ugly, fat digitals. Yay. Then Charlotte, Jerome, and other piercing guy watched me do my walk, and, to my relief, were all very pleased. Charlotte posted on her Instagram 2 pictures of me getting shot by piercing guy. Leaving the Ford office, I felt that I had very effectively fallen into my role and played the part of sweet, excited, outgoing 16-year-old model. The best I've ever played it. I almost even managed to convince myself that that is what I'm meant to be. There are a few points I want to draw out from this entry. First, it shows the variety of visual performances the model is called to give in a moment when she's not even working, and the representations of herself that she encounters. Two types of digitals: a video, a demonstration of the runway walk, Instagram posts portraying the process of being photographed, and the website portfolio of updated images. The comment about my old fat digitals, quote unquote, shows that I had already internalized the toxic thin ideal of the fashion industry and was exercising it in my appraisal of my own image. The several visual practices listed in this one interaction immerse the model in an environment of representation that acclimates her to the idea that she is a constant appearance. Second, I want to underscore that the entry shows me learning the affective and gestural components of the model body. When I say the model body is learned, this is what I mean. We see the French agent teaching me to seduce the camera and play with my hair to project a certain mood and convey commercialized feeling. These gestures and poses also become second nature to the model. If display becomes a way of life, posing becomes a mode of embodiment and a way that the model inhabits her body beyond the photo shoot. Third, we can also deduce from this entry that for the model, her position itself is a type of performance. When I left the agency that day, I wrote that I was satisfied because I'd fallen into my role and played the part of the model convincingly. I was performing not only the poses that a model performs, modeling itself was a pose that I was learning to assume. And of course, the model's display goes beyond what's listed here. Not only does she pose on the photo shoot and on the catwalk, the model also poses for backstage photos behind the scenes of her actual work and street style photos when she is not even at work. But these are still places where the model is treated as a model rather than being anonymous. Here's a collection of backstage close-ups taken from different websites' coverage of a Nina Ricci show in 2016. Me and Waleska and Yana, the other two models, are waiting in line to go out on the catwalk. And it's funny to see these photos because we're just like waiting in line. And then as soon as a camera comes up to us, we're activated with this smoldering look. And it's just like this is the model body. This is not me. This is us putting on a performance that becomes a reflex to responding to a gaze. In these four photos, we see a serialization of existence where several images are captured of just one moment by several cameras from several different angles that get disseminated through different outlets. And this applies to so many moments of existence for models. So that display isn't just something a model body does, it is the texture of existence for model bodies. Here we see a video that is on YouTube that runs much longer than this clip that I'm about to play, showing all the models who exit a Chanel show as they are greeted by waiting street-style photographers.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, look here. Thank you.
It's like cringy watching this video because we can see, I can see like how hard I'm trying to embody this thing that I'm not, which is like an adult, feminine, alluring subject. Um, some of us are giving a serious model performance, and others are more indifferent. It is interesting to me, though, that the job has ended, yet we hear the clicking of cameras. The models are wearing their own clothes now. There's no client in this scene and no product to sell, except for maybe the product of the model's persona. There's a pervasive expectation that models can render themselves into aesthetic content at any moment with a certain amount of readiness and ease. And this is how the display and the pose come to extend beyond the photo and beyond the catwalk and become a variety of embodiment itself. I want to tie together my observations by connecting them to Simone de Beauvoir's ideas about gender. Beauvoir writes that women don't experience their bodies as their selves in the same direct way that men do, because women are always marked by their gender. While men can think of themselves outside of their gender and their relation to women, women can't think of themselves outside their gender or their relation to men. Beauvoir does not believe that women exist in terms of any kind of feminine essence, nor that they are defined by anatomy. What exists for Beauvoir is not a female nature, but a female situation, which is the situation of finding oneself defined as inessential compared to man's essential subjectivity. And in particular, in the historical inability to do as many things as men do, women express what they are through their appearances. Femininity is a subjectivity that comes into being by being perceived by a spectator, even if that spectator is imagined. Beauvoir writes that woman seeks out the glance that has the power to animate her image of herself, and her experience of herself is mediated through her awareness of being appreciated as herself by another. This situation can be pleasurable, but it can also alienate one from oneself. For models, this situation is heightened to the point that it is hard to do anything without thinking about how one looks while doing it. A model's appearance is all important to her very existence as a model, and the rewards for performing a desirable appearance are lucrative and exciting. Modeling is in some ways an extreme version of the female situation that Beauvoir describes. Models experience both the heightened self-alienation of being the second sex and the heightened privileges of female gender and existing as an aesthetic object. In closing my thesis, I use phenomenological concepts such as the body's sedimented history and the idea of a bodily habitus, which Pierre Bourdieu describes as a system of durable, transposable dispositions, to consider the ways that modeling's intensified visibility lives on in the body. After modeling, my body always feels like it is bearing a look from somewhere or nowhere and performing even for an imagined audience. The long-term effects of living in an environment of representation is that one continues to live in that environment, even once the actual means of representation have fallen away. Scrutiny enters the body schema, and it can be felt there after the scrutiny has moved on. If I pursue future iterations of this project, I would like to incorporate more fat study scholarship as a perspective for understanding the thin ideal better. And I would also like to find out more about how other models feel. I'm not sure how much of my experience of my body as an unrelenting performance should be classified as an embodied legacy of modeling, or how much of it is common to people socialized in female gender, or just specific to me. And I would like to find that out if I had more time with this work. And at that point, I open it up for questions and wrap up my presentation.